Joe.
Alright, this guy. What?
You need to make another video for Pete's sake.
I'm gonna, don't worry. It's just gonna take a little while, alright?
Why don't you make that review video you were planning?
You know, there's a whole laundry list of things I can tell you for why that's not gonna happen anytime soon. It's gonna happen, but not right now.
Then just do another video of something you did a while back that was popular.
Hey, you know what? That's a great idea. I think I'll do another Creepypasta video. Let's get started.
If you touch me, I'll murder your face off.
What is wrong with you? Yes, hello guys. Welcome back. It's been a while since I've done this. I remember doing these and people seeming to really like them. So, you know what? I figured I'd do it again. Why not? Oh, and I do have another video in the works and it's gonna be a big one. So, here's a little something to hold you over until that. I found a creepypasta for you guys and it's got a pretty funny name. Creepin' Jesus. If that's not a recipe for success, I don't know what is. Let's get started. This is boring. Museums are rubbish. Fabian James, will you be quiet? Mr. Jenkins, the teacher, hissed through clenched teeth for the third time that day. Please pay attention and stop ruining things for everyone else. Some of the other members of Fabian's class giggled, looking forward to another amusing episode. Fabian just looked down and kicked the toe of his shoe against the floor. Fabian's a little shithead. The curator that had been showing them around continued. And this is the archaeology section, the Bowing Gallery, where we keep historical items that have been dug up. They tell us a lot about the past. I fumbled my word there. Have you got any axes and spears? Fabian asked, suddenly looking up. Well, no, but we do have, just so I can kill Tommy with one, Fabian interrupted. That'll get you kicked out of school, kid. Fabian, erupted Mr. Jenkins. I won't have that kind of talk. I'd kill you first anyway, muttered Tommy, so that only Fabian could hear. I thought he was going to say it to the teacher. I was about to laugh. What we do have is something scary, the curator continued, trying to get the class's attention back. A skeleton. Some of the class perked up at that. A skeleton, you say? Yes. It was dug up in a bear's twith? A berry's twith? It was dug up in a castle 20 years ago. We have assembled the pieces over here, he said, gesturing towards the glass display case, causing the children to crowd around it. And skeletons aren't scary anymore. Fabian is a little jerk. Fabian laughed. They were only scary hundreds of years ago. Only aliens or zombies are scary now. Or Freddy Krueger. Skeletons are just sad. Wait, when was this wrote? The 80s? Was Freddy Krueger a thing in the 90s or the early 2000s? I can't remember. Right? That's it, snapped Mr. Jenkins. Fabian, if you speak again and interrupt the curator, you are going to miss out on the school party next week. You will be banned from attending and I'll write a letter to your parents explaining why. Your behavior has been disgraceful today. I had a stroke. And I am very disappointed in you. It is like you have been trying your best to ruin the day for everyone, despite us being in this lovely museum and being shown around. Alright, so Fabian is a little butthole, but the teacher's a bit of a wiener. The weenie in the butt in the morning. And he touched all the things in the that said, please do not touch, said Jessica. Who's Jessica? He spilt Coke on the carpet in the shop on purpose, alleged Tommy. He pulled my plate, added Amanda. What's a plate? Gross. Fabian stole 2 of my sweeties and put them both in his mouth at once. God damn. Gotta love Facebook notifications. They're fantastic. And he said a rude word when we went to the top balcony, added little David Hughes. What am I reading here? So that's your last warning, shouted Mr. Jenkins, red-faced with exasperation. Don't speak again, Fabian. Fabian knew Mr. Jenkins was serious, so he shut up and let the curator talk about cannonballs and broken vases, though he couldn't resist sticking 2 fingers up at Tommy when Mr. Jenkins wasn't looking. Alright, so this is a British story. I'm getting, because the 2 fingers thing is like a middle finger to Britain and Australia. I don't know. Could be one or the other. Bucket over your head, you wanker. I'm sorry, please don't be offended if you're British. His interest perked up at the recreation of an Iron Age hut. At one end, a life-size creepy dummy of a girl held a stick and stared out. From the other end, you could see another dummy squatting over a fake fire, eerily lit by the orange light that made it look like flames. The fake hut was lined with rags and had deep shadows as black as night. The dummies looked as fake as lots of other stuff in the museum, Fabian thought, but it wasn't them that interested him. A devious expression crossed Fabian's chubby features. Oh, he's a little fat kid like I was. Yay! Well, I can't speak, but I guess I can still have fun, Fabian thought, hanging around at the back of the group. Mr. Jenkins thanked the curator for being so helpful. It had been nice for the last half hour, looking at the items arranged around the top gallery. The children had all been quiet, so he was able to ignore them and listen to the curator's interesting comments. As the group moved back down the shop to Mr. Jenkins, As the group moved back down to the shop, alright, that was just me, Mr. Jenkins saw that many of the parents were waiting there already to collect their children. I can't talk. To collect their children. It being the end of the day. Some children ran off to their families. Wet. Others left the museum, and it was hard to keep track of who had been collected and who hadn't in the chaos. Is he gonna get left behind? If he's stuck in the museum, that'd be awesome. Not at the museum 4. I dig it. The museum was locked up for the night. All the staff had gone home, but the museum wasn't empty. Fabian crawled out from behind the big basket of wool in the Iron Age hut. He was getting hungry, but it was worth it, he thought spitefully. So you're starving to death, and you're just... Imagine dying, starving, on the floor of a museum, staying there when it had closed, and your last words are, worth it. Mr. Jenkins would be in so much trouble when Fabian's parents found out he had been abandoned in the museum by a careless teacher. Mr. Jenkins might even get the sack. That'd be good, Fabian thought, a nasty grin on his face. He is a little shithead. Of course, that wouldn't happen for a while. Dad would be working late, and if his mom did her aerobics video again, she wouldn't notice that he hadn't walked home until tea time. Yep, it's British. The meal no doubt delayed as usual. Still, they would notice eventually, he was sure. It was dark in the archaeology room. The only illumination was the orange light from the fake fire in the hut, and a faint orange glow from the street lamp outside the museum. There was just enough illumination to see though it looked eerie and deep shadows in the room that seemed to move when you weren't looking at them, as if the whole room was a crackling fire. He crawled out under the wires which were meant to stop people from entering the exhibit, and decided to try the door that led out to the Bowen Gallery, and into the main part of the museum. He was sure he would have fun running around and eating chocolate from the shop until a teacher came back, or his parents or the police, to rescue him. He turned the door handle and pulled, but the door wouldn't budge. No shit, Sherlock. You need a key to open those things. Trust me, I've tried. He tried again and realized it must be locked. He had thought it was just the click of the door closing when a member of museum staff had put the main lights out and left. But he must have actually locked the door, not just closed it. Why lock an empty room? Fabian murmured aloud. Suddenly he jumped when he heard a muffled thump from somewhere in the room. Only something I've disturbed, he thought nervously. I'll just wait in here and someone will come soon. He decided to look at some of the boring stones and bits of rubbish anyway, but as he turned away from the door, he caught a glimpse of this strange Iron Age girl dummy. Who's he to judge? How does he know she's dumb? The one that stood behind him, and he felt that its eyes suddenly flicked forwards as they had been looking at him. His heart skipped a beat. Don't be daft. Don't be daft, he told himself. It's only a dummy. And it is so dark in here you couldn't see it properly. Anyway, I'm not doing that. He knew he only had to pry the dummy with his finger to prove it was a lifeless piece of plastic, but he couldn't bring himself to do that. In daylight, her skin looked dry and plasticky, her hand fake and twisted wrongly, her hair artificial and straggly, but in the weird orange glow, she looked a lot more real. The eyes particularly glinted. For all those reasons, Fabian couldn't bring himself to move within reach of that hooked lower hand, so he moved quickly away. Trick of the light, he muttered, like he'd heard in a film once, though he didn't like the sound of his voice in the otherwise silent room. It felt like it didn't belong there. Yeah, it's because you're in a museum that's locked. You're not supposed to be there. He moved over to the cabinet that had clay smoking pipes. and tried to be interested. He noticed that one pipe was red on the bit that goes in your mouth. It reminded him of blood. What a weird thing to think. Then the hairs on the back of his neck started to rise. His eyes focused differently, and he saw that there was a reflection of a dummy in the glass panel over the pipes, and the head was slowly turning towards him. Is this an episode of Goosebumps? He spun around, heart really racing now, and he noticed that the dummy, although deathly still again, was leaning right against the crisscrossed wire. It fell forward. It just fell forward, he repeated like a chant. There was a click, and the orange light in the hut went out. Fabian knew the bulb could have blown, but it sounded more like it had been switched off from within the display. The thought of the crouching dummy on the other side of the hut next to where he had originally hidden made him shudder. And now he could hardly see anything despite the faint streetlight outside. He kept his eyes on the dummy. It didn't move, and a horrible memory surfaced in his mind. The game he had liked to play when his granny was alive. He used to sneak up on her when she wasn't paying attention, freezing if she looked his way. She was so short-sighted, she didn't notice him if he wasn't moving, until he was almost next to her and he could stealthily make his way up to her while she read or watched TV. Then he would just say something like, "Do you want a cup of tea? Do you want a cup of tea, Granny?" in his most innocent voice. Granny would leap out of the chair in shock, hand clasped to her breast, and glare at him until she got her breath back to scold him. "You killed your granny, didn't you? Gave her a heart attack. Little shit." And he would just sweetly claim he had snuck up on her, saying it wasn't his fault if she was half blind. You little shit. Leaving her squinting at him with pursed lips, shaking with frustration and impotence. He's impotent? So she had nicknamed Fabian Creeping Jesus, and always said it in a mean way. She called him that whenever his mother wasn't around, right up until the day Granny had a heart attack and died a few years ago. I called it. This little butthole gave his granny a heart attack. Oh, that's horrible. After that, he had felt funny and had bad dreams for a while in which Granny just pointed at him and ground her teeth together but said nothing. But then Dad had bought him a PS2 and he forgot about Granny. Well, Creeping Jesus. Maybe they couldn't move while he was looking, but the head of the dummy turned a little more. He could just make out the movement in the darkness, and the clawed hand seemed to be reaching forwards. Maybe in the dark the normal rule didn't apply. He ran into the area that had a bench that you could only get to from one end and hid underneath, hoping he would be safe there. But as he listened, he became aware of a rustling and dragging noise that seemed to be moving across the floor to where he was hidden. It sounded like something in scratchy clothes pulling itself along the floor towards him, not even trying to be stealthy. There were occasional bumps, as if whatever it was didn't have proper joints. It was moving using stiff arms and legs, which made walking properly impossible, but crawling just about doable. See, it was getting kinda spooky there, and then it was just like, it was doable. Why not? He scrunched his eyes tightly closed, but in his mind, he just saw the dummies and their creepy faces, dragging themselves along the floor. Dragging, not even trying to creep anymore. "Oh, mummy," he said as two shapes pulled themselves nearer. "Please no, please no, please no," he continued to say as cold hands groped for him, eventually latching onto one of his ankles. Suddenly a tug of inhuman strength pulled him part way out from under the bench, and he felt another hooked hand grab his wrist and tug that hard too. He squirmed, heart beating fast, as stiff arms dragged him fully out. He only just found the breath to scream as the heavy stones were brought down hard against his body. Again and again, but the screaming stopped seconds later when the dull blows crushed his skull, and from then on the only noise that could be heard from outside the room was a heavy thump-thump noise with the faint occasional dull cracking sound, and eventually a wet slurping noise, like a boy drinking milkshake through a straw. In the darkness, an impossibly limp shape was dragged into the Iron Age exhibition. It was so floppy it fitted into the little gap under a floorboard in the fake hut, and the floorboard was then covered by smelly rugs. The curator put the phone down with a sigh. He was unhappy at having had to come back to the museum at night, unlocking everything and looking around with his torch, especially in some of the rooms and areas where the hairs on the back of his neck prickled sometimes for no apparent reason, such as near the stuffed animals or the Bowen gallery. Silly to feel that way, but he couldn't help it. Anyway, he knew the kid hadn't been left in the museum because he had just looked in every room, shown his torch in every dusty corner, and all locked doors were still locked. There were no boys hidden anywhere. The kid must have got lost somewhere else after he'd left. Everything was in its right place. Well, almost. It was a bit weird that one of the skeleton bones had been left on the floor outside the glass case in the Bowen Gallery. Probably something to do with the horrible kid who had been messing around and not showing the museum its proper respect. The curator put the small bone back in the glass where it belonged. The end. You know, it's been a while since I've actually heard a good one. That one is actually pretty spooky. It seemed like something straight out of like Fear Street or Goosebumps, but it's good. It's good. It's good. Ah, man. Nice to be back in the swing of things. I dig it. Well, guys, if you enjoyed that video, why not give it a like? If you're new, why not subscribe? I'm going to be posting stuff whenever I feel like it. Not regularly. I don't have a schedule. Whenever I feel like making a video, I make one. So, yeah. I'll see you in the next video of whatever I decide to make, guys. Bye. I'm not high-fiving the camera anymore. That's a cliche at this point. Bye!